My fiancée said she had a special connection with her childhood friend. I didn't mind until I found out how special it was. She thought I'd never know. But I didn't just find out, I destroyed her world on our wedding day. I loved Hannah more than anything. When we first met at a mutual friend's barbecue 3 years ago, I knew she was different. She had this way of lighting up a room with her smile, of making everyone feel heard and understood. Smart, caring, ambitious, she was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. We moved in together after a year, bought a charming colonial house in the suburbs, and started planning our future. Marriage was the natural next step. Everyone said we were perfect together. But there was always Eric. He'd been her best friend since elementary school. They grew up 3 houses apart, shared every milestone, every triumph, every setback. Hannah always said he was her platonic soulmate, the brother she never had. I actually liked the guy at first. He was charismatic, quick-witted, and seemed genuinely supportive of our relationship. When Hannah and I announced our engagement, he was the first to congratulate us, raising a toast at our celebration dinner with tears in his eyes. I never considered him a threat. I prided myself on not being the jealous type. When Hannah told me about their weekly coffee meetups, I encouraged them. When she spent hours on the phone with him after his mother passed away, I brought her tea and gave her space. Their friendship was part of who she was, and I loved all of her. The first crack appeared during a quiet Sunday afternoon. We were curled up on the couch watching a movie when her phone buzzed. The moment she saw Eric's name, she practically leaped up, muttering something about poor reception as she hurried to the kitchen. It seemed odd, but I brushed it off. Then it happened again at dinner with my parents. And again during our vacation in Cape Cod. Each time, she'd step away, speaking in hushed tones, returning with slightly flushed cheeks and a forced smile. I started noticing other things too. How she always positioned her phone screen away from me when texting him. How she'd quickly close her laptop when I entered the room. Just sharing silly memes, she'd say with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. You wouldn't get our inside jokes anyway. Then came that message. I hadn't meant to see it, I respect privacy more than anything. But as I reached across her desk for a charger, her phone lit up with a notification, I can't wait to feel you again. The world stopped spinning for a moment. My hands went cold, and my stomach twisted into knots. But I forced myself to breathe normally, to maintain my composure. A part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, to shake the truth out of her. But a deeper, calmer part knew that would only lead to denials, tears, and half-truths. I needed the whole picture. I became a detective in my own home. I started paying attention to patterns, when she'd disappear for grocery runs that took hours, how Eric's car would sometimes be parked 2 blocks away instead of in front of his apartment. I noted how they'd both post social media updates from supposedly different locations at the same time. The final piece fell into place on a rainy Thursday. Hannah was taking an unusually long shower, the kind where she plays music to drown out any noise. Her laptop sat on the kitchen counter, still open to her messenger. My hands shook as I scrolled through their conversations. Everything was there. Every lie. Every betrayal. Every moment they'd stolen from me. They'd been sleeping together for 2 years, starting just months after I proposed. They met in hotel rooms, in his apartment, and, my stomach churned, in our bed when I traveled for work. They discussed their feelings, planned their rendezvous, and even joked about me. Eric had helped her pick out her wedding dress, commenting how beautiful she'd look walking down the aisle. All while knowing he'd been with her the night before. I sat there for what felt like hours, reading through 2 years of deception. But instead of rage, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. A plan began forming in my mind. Something far more satisfying than a simple confrontation. For the next 3 months, I played the role of devoted fiancé perfectly. I threw myself into wedding planning with enthusiasm that made Hannah beam. I bonded with Eric over beer and wedding details, watching him squirm ever so slightly when I talked about my love for Hannah. I even asked him to be one of my groomsmen, saying I couldn't imagine our special day without him there. The wedding day arrived on a perfect June morning. The ceremony was being held at the Grand St. Patrick's Cathedral, Hannah's dream venue. 200 guests filled the pews, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of lilies. Hannah looked radiant in her white gown, the one Eric had helped choose. He sat in the front row, next to her parents, wearing a practiced smile. The ceremony began. The priest spoke of love, trust, and fidelity. I could see Hannah tearing up, her hands trembling slightly in mine. When the moment came for our vows, the priest asked the traditional question. Do you take Hannah to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? I looked into Hannah's eyes, seeing confusion flicker across her face as my silence stretched just a moment too long. The room grew still. Before I answer, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the hushed church, I think we should all be honest with each other. Honesty is the foundation of marriage, isn't it, Hannah? She froze, her smile becoming fixed and brittle. I turned to address our guests, pulling out my phone. I'd like to share something with everyone. A story about trust, friendship, and betrayal. I opened the screenshots I'd carefully saved. Hannah and Eric have been sleeping together for 2 years. In our home. In our bed. While planning this very wedding. The church erupted in gasps and murmurs. Hannah's mother let out a choked sob. Eric half rose from his seat, then sank back down, his face ashen. I have proof, I continued calmly, messages. Photos. Hotel receipts. Even a video of them together from last week. Would anyone like to see? Please, Hannah whispered, gripping my arm. We can talk about this. I gently removed her hand. We had 3 months to talk about it. 3 months where you continued to lie to my face. To plan this wedding while sleeping with him. I turned back to the guests. She let me spend thousands on this ceremony, knowing she was betraying me. She let her parents give us their life savings for a down payment on our house, while she was making a mockery of everything we built. Hannah had crumpled to her knees, her perfect white dress pooling around her. Eric finally stood, taking a step forward. Listen, man, I can explain. Explain what? I cut him off. How you helped her pick out this dress. How you gave a toast at our engagement party. How you accepted my invitation to be a groomsman while sleeping with my fiancée. The silence was deafening. Hannah's father had his head in his hands. Her mother was openly weeping. Friends and family members stared in horror, phones forgotten in their laps. The worst part, I said, my voice softening, isn't the betrayal itself. It's the casual cruelty of it all. How you both could look me in the eye day after day, plan this future with me, all while laughing behind my back. I stepped back from the altar. So no, Father, I don't take Hannah to be my wife. I don't take her lies, her betrayal, or her false love. I leave her with the truth she tried so hard to hide, and the consequences of her choices. With that, I walked down the aisle, past the shocked faces, past Hannah's broken sobs, past Eric's attempts to speak. I pushed open the heavy church doors and stepped into the sunlight. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was catastrophic. Hannah's parents, devastated by the public humiliation and the money they'd lost, refused to speak to her. Most of their friends chose sides, and few chose hers. She lost her job after videos from the wedding went viral in their small community. Eric's long-term girlfriend discovered everything and left him, taking their dog and half their savings. Hannah tried reaching out countless times. Calls, texts, emails begging for forgiveness, claiming she'd made a terrible mistake, that what we had was real despite her actions. Eric sent a long letter explaining how guilty he'd felt, how he'd wanted to end it but couldn't. I never responded to either of them. Some people said I was cruel, that I could have handled it privately. Maybe they're right. But when you spend years living a lie, when the people you trust most conspire to deceive you, sometimes the truth needs to be as loud as the lies were quiet. I moved to Seattle last month, accepted a job offer I'd been considering. I rented a modern apartment overlooking Lake Union, joined a rock climbing gym, started building a new routine. The city's constant rain feels appropriate somehow, cleansing, washing away the past. Last week, I received a thick envelope from Hannah's sister Claire. Inside was a letter explaining how everything had fallen apart after the wedding. Hannah had moved back in with her parents initially, but the tension became unbearable. Her father, a proud man who'd worked his entire life to give his children everything, couldn't bear to look at her. The shame of having their family's dirty laundry aired so publicly in front of their entire social circle was too much. After 2 weeks of strained silences and whispered arguments, Hannah moved out. She tried staying with Eric, a last desperate attempt to prove their love was worth all this destruction. It lasted exactly 17 days. Without the thrill of secrecy, without the elaborate deception that had made their affair so exciting, they found themselves strangers. Eric, faced with the consequences of his actions, began to resent Hannah for costing him his reputation, his relationship, his comfortable life. Their passionate love affair dissolved into bitter arguments about whose fault it was, who should have stopped it, who should have confessed sooner. Claire's letter included photos, Hannah sleeping on her couch, mascara-stained tissues scattered around her, all her belongings packed in 3 suitcases. She'd lost her job at the architectural firm where she'd worked for 6 years. Someone had posted the wedding video online, and it had circulated through professional circles. No one wanted to hire someone with such questionable judgment, such public drama. Eric hadn't fared much better. His girlfriend Angela had been out of town during the wedding, visiting family in Florida. She watched everything unfold through frantic phone calls and text messages from mutual friends. By the time she returned, she'd already emptied their joint account and arranged to stay with her sister. She'd loved Eric for 5 years, supported him through grad school, talked about starting a family. Finding out he'd been lying to her for 2 years broke something in her that might never heal. The last page of Claire's letter was a note from Hannah herself. The handwriting was shaky, nothing like her usual confident scrawl. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know nothing I say can undo what I did. But I need you to understand, what I felt for you was real. Every dream we shared, every plan we made, every moment of joy and love, that was real. Eric was. I don't even know anymore. An addiction. A connection to my past I couldn't let go of. A way to sabotage my own happiness because I was scared of how perfect everything was. I've spent months in therapy trying to understand why I would destroy something so beautiful for stolen moments that meant nothing in the end. I lost everything. My family barely speaks to me. My friends have chosen sides, and I don't blame them for not choosing mine. I can't find work in this town, everyone knows me as the cheating bride, the woman who let her fiancé spend a fortune on a wedding she didn't deserve. Eric and I can barely look at each other now. All that passion, all those promises we whispered in secret, they turned to ash the moment they were exposed to daylight. I'm moving to Portland next month. Starting over. I don't expect you to care, and I'm not asking for another chance. I just wanted you to know that your revenge worked better than you could have imagined. You didn't just destroy my wedding day, you destroyed my entire world. And the worst part is, I deserved it all. I read the letter 3 times before placing it carefully back in the envelope. Claire had included her phone number, saying she'd understand if I wanted to know more, to hear how Hannah was doing, to gain some closure. I never called. Some nights, when the Seattle rain drums against my windows and sleep won't come, I think about Hannah. About the future we'd planned, the life we could have had. I think about the moment in the church when everything shattered, when the truth burst through the surface like a whale breaching the ocean's calm. I think about karma, justice, revenge. Was I cruel? Maybe. The public humiliation, the calculated destruction of her life, some would say it went too far. But betrayal of that magnitude, sustained over years, built on thousands of small lies and casual deceptions, it deserves a reckoning just as elaborate, just as complete. I'm dating again, cautiously. Sarah, a software engineer I met through work, has been patient with my trust issues, understanding of my need for complete honesty. Last week, she asked why I left Boston. I told her the whole story. She was quiet for a long time before saying, "I don't know if I could have done that," exposed everything so publicly. "But I understand why you did." Do I regret it? That's a complicated question. The revenge brought no joy, no real satisfaction. It didn't heal the wound of betrayal or restore my faith in love. But it did something else. It forced the truth into the light, made everyone face the reality of their choices. Hannah and Eric wanted to live in shadows, to have their secret passion while maintaining their respectable lives. I simply turned on the lights. Sometimes karma doesn't come naturally. Sometimes you have to help it along. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't in the punishment itself, but in forcing people to live with the unvarnished truth of who they really are. The wedding video went viral in ways I never expected. Someone had been live streaming for distant relatives, and clips spread through social media like wildfire. Local news picked up the story. Reddit threads debated the ethics of my actions. Strangers on the internet took sides, arguing about whether the public humiliation was justified. The irony wasn't lost on me. Hannah and Eric's secret affair, hidden so carefully for years, had become entertainment for millions. Their private betrayal transformed into a public spectacle, their shame preserved forever in digital amber. In trying to protect their secret, they'd created something that would follow them forever, just a Google search away. Claire's updates continued, though I never asked for them. Eric had moved to Chicago, trying to escape the notoriety. He'd lost his job at the investment firm, not directly because of the scandal, but because clients had started requesting different advisors, uncomfortable with trusting their money to someone with such questionable character. His girlfriend Angela had written a viral Medium post about being the unsuspecting partner of a cheater, about rebuilding trust after betrayal. She never named him, but everyone knew. Hannah's parents eventually let her move back home, but things were different. Her mother, who'd spent months planning the perfect wedding, who'd handwritten 200 invitations and coordinated with vendors and created elaborate centerpieces, couldn't look at her daughter without seeing all that wasted effort, all that public shame. Her father's law firm partners had made subtle comments about family values and reputation. The happy family photos that once lined their walls were quietly replaced with landscapes and abstract art. I heard through mutual friends that Hannah started therapy, trying to understand why she'd sabotaged her own happiness. She'd told her therapist about her childhood with Eric, about the comfort of their shared history, about the way their friendship had morphed into something destructive. She talked about the thrill of secrecy, the addictive rush of getting away with something forbidden. But mostly, she talked about the guilt, not just for betraying me, but for destroying so many lives in the process. The thing about revenge is that it ripples outward, touching lives you never meant to affect. Hannah's younger sister had to change her wedding plans, too haunted by the memory of her sister's disastrous ceremony to use the same church. Eric's elderly mother, already fragile after his father's death, suffered a minor stroke from the stress of the scandal. Even our mutual friends struggled, forced to choose sides, to untangle years of shared memories and decide which relationships to preserve. Sarah says I need to let it go, that holding on to the past only hurts me. She's probably right. But there's something about knowing that Hannah and Eric have to face the consequences of their actions every day, that they can't simply move on and pretend it never happened, that feels like justice. Last month, I received a wedding invitation from my college roommate Mark. The envelope included a handwritten note, I know this might be awkward, but I want you to know that Hannah and Eric aren't invited. Some people might think I'm taking sides, but real friends don't betray people they love. I'm going to the wedding. I'll smile and celebrate and wish the happy couple well. And if anyone brings up my own almost wedding, I'll simply say that the truth has a way of coming out, one way or another. Sometimes it takes a little push, a moment of calculated revelation, but in the end, everyone has to face who they really are and what they've done. The rain is letting up in Seattle. Spring is coming, bringing new beginnings and fresh starts. I'm learning to trust again, slowly. Sarah and I are talking about moving in together. She keeps her phone screen visible when she texts, answers calls in front of me, shares her location freely. She understands my need for transparency, never complains about my occasional moments of paranoia. Sometimes I dream about the wedding day, about Hannah's face when everything fell apart. In the dreams, I feel a mix of satisfaction and sadness, triumph and loss. I wake up wondering if there could have been another way, a quieter revenge, a private reckoning. But then I remember the years of lies, the careful deceptions, the way they played their parts so perfectly while betraying me in the most intimate way possible. They chose to live a lie. I simply chose to expose the truth. And in the end, that exposure was a far more devastating revenge than any act of violence or retribution could have been. Because now they have to live with not just the consequences of their actions, but with the knowledge that everyone else knows exactly who they are and what they did. Karma might be slow, but with a little help, it arrives exactly when it should. Yesterday, Sarah found Hannah's letter while we were packing for our move to a bigger apartment. She read it silently, then looked at me with those understanding eyes of hers. "You should burn it," she said. "Let the past stay in the past." She was right, of course. I took the letter to our building's rooftop garden. The Seattle skyline glittered before me as I struck a match. As the paper curled and blackened in the flames, I thought about the nature of revenge and justice, about the fine line between punishment and cruelty. What I did to Hannah and Eric wasn't just about exposing their affair. It was about stripping away their carefully constructed facades, forcing them to face the reality of their choices in front of everyone they loved. The public humiliation was brutal, yes, but it was also honest, a mirror reflecting back the ugliness they'd tried to hide. Claire's last update came 3 days ago. Hannah's finally found a job in Portland, at a small architectural firm that either didn't know about the wedding scandal or chose to give her a second chance. She's dating someone new, Claire says, but it's different now. She's different. The therapy has helped her understand her patterns of self-destruction, her need for validation, her inability to let go of toxic connections. Eric's in Chicago, rebuilding his life one small step at a time. His ex-girlfriend Angela's Medium post went viral enough to land her a book deal. She's writing about healing from betrayal, about rebuilding trust after deception. In a way, their affair created ripples that might actually help others heal from similar wounds. Some might say my revenge was too harsh, too public, too calculated. They might be right. But in a world where people can hide behind screens, where deception is easier than ever, where truth seems increasingly optional, sometimes exposure is the only justice that matters. Sarah and I are building something real, something based on honesty and trust. When she tells me she loves me, I believe her. When she says she'll be home late from work, I don't check her location or wonder who she's with. Healing is possible, even after the deepest betrayals. The wedding invitation from Mark sits on our coffee table. I've RSVP'd yes, and Sarah's coming with me. Life goes on, circles back, offers new beginnings. But the lessons remain, truth may hurt, but lies destroy. And sometimes, the most devastating revenge isn't in what you do to someone, but in forcing them to face what they've done to themselves. The ashes of Hannah's letter scattered in the wind, carrying with them the last remnants of my need for vengeance. I don't regret what I did, some betrayals deserve their moment of reckoning. But I'm ready now to focus on the future, on building something new with someone who understands the value of truth. After all, karma works in mysterious ways. Sometimes it needs a little push, a moment of calculated revelation, a spotlight shining into dark corners. But once it starts moving, there's no stopping it. And in the end, everyone faces the truth of who they are and what they've done. That's the real revenge, not the moment of exposure, but the lifetime of living with it that follows.